the co-founders of Sonic Boom. There are two of us, and I'll be leading you through our curriculum today. Let me just forewarn you that I'm going to talk very quickly. We're going to be throwing quite a bit of content your way. We're going to be covering a lot of ground, and it's going to be basically 6 years of distilled information of us testing incentive strategies and theories with real live clients. It's factoring in a lot of data that we've compiled over the years, factors in a lot of really smart people that have helped us collaborate on incentive theory, including a lot of the brokers and consultants that are on the line today, as well as some friends of ours that are actuaries specific to the wellness industry. So this is not, conjecture. It is, however, somewhat opinionated, and it will be contrarian in many ways. So I would suspect that as we go through this, many of you will be nodding. Some of you may be scratching your heads, and some of you may be shaking your head vehemently disagreeing with what we say. But that's all okay. This is going to be a good, healthy debate. The way that you can correspond with me during the course of the webinar is through the questions function. If you look down to the right-hand screen, you're going to find that you have a toolbar where you can ask me questions as we go. I probably won't stop too much throughout this because I have so much to cover in so little time, but we will definitely answer all the questions that people have at the end. So with that, here's the agenda that we're going to be covering today. And, whoops, we'll go ahead and get started. Actually, let me close out of this, open up my toolbar. Okay, so let's roll. You can see the agenda. I won't repeat the words on the screen because it bugs me a lot when presenters do that. You can read perfectly well, so I'm just going to dive right in. First thing I'd like to say is what you're doing right now, or what most of you are doing right now, is killing you. If you are sitting down, you are literally taking minutes off of your life, and there is so much research to back this up, and I did start with a grabber because I'd like you to just think about some of the things that happen as we become more and more tethered to our chairs. And really, sitting is the new smoking. It's the smoking of our generation. And there are many ways to combat this, and I think one of the main, the impetus for a lot of the incentive strategies that you see in the country, it's becoming very fashionable to incent people to get off their butts and start moving more, is because sitting is so caustic. It is so harmful to people. So I won't read everything on the screen. I'll let you read this. And by the way, we are recording this. You're welcome to have us send you a copy of the PowerPoint as you're done. But what we're finding in the market is that incentives are becoming quite fashionable. And they're becoming very popular, especially with the healthcare reform laws that are becoming much more lenient in terms of what you can do relative to healthcare premium contributions. And what I'd like to start with is just a quick definition. Really, an incentive is just anything that can motivate an individual or animal, in this instance, to perform any sort of action. So, of course, this little friend here, our mouse, will perform all sorts of acrobatics to get that cheese, and a lot of employers think that by dangling cheese in front of their employees, they can get them to perform acrobatics as well. I'm going to show you our findings on that contention. First thing I'd like to do is define the different classes of incentives that you might be thinking about. First and foremost is the remunerative class. These are the financial incentives that everyone's so used to. These are usually in the form of if-then rewards. So if you do this, then I will give you that. It's a reward in exchange for acting in a certain way or exhibiting a certain behavior. Down at the bottom here is what we're finding become more in vogue, related especially to things like tobacco cessation, where you're going to be punishing people for failure to act in a certain way that you'd like them to act. What we find most employers miss completely is this bucket in the middle, the social incentives and the personal intrinsic motivation. This is your most powerful arsenal right here that you can leverage without spending a dime. We're going to explore a lot of these different areas today. We're going to outline the pros and cons of each of these 4 types of classes, and then we'll give you some ideas on how you can execute a best-in-class incentive system. So the market is definitely headed in the direction of using remunerative incentives. These are people that are using a lot of cash and gift cards predominantly, or healthcare premium discounts, HSA contributions, et cetera. Sometimes points to be exchanged for merchandise in a catalog, or experiential rewards like giving people dinner tickets or vacation tickets, things like that. The biggest trend is that people are rewarding for participation. About 69% are rewarding just generally for their programs in some way, shape, or form based on participating in those programs. Very few employers at this point in the game are rewarding on the basis of actual healthcare outcomes or results, but that trend is increasing radically. The other thing we're finding is that, and this, by the way, is based on a RAND study that just came out toward the tail end of 2012. They surveyed hundreds of employers with 50 or more employees. Basically, they're finding that the dollar amount that people are rewarding, that employers are rewarding, is much, much higher when they reward on the basis of results, especially when you look at tobacco cessation. And of course, usually that comes in the form of a penalty or a penalty in disguise, meaning a tobacco surcharge of some fixed dollar amount. So what we really want to talk about today, though, is whether or not wellness incentives actually work. And when we say work, we're really talking about it depends on your goal. Is your goal to induce people to perform a short-term behavior, a one-time event, some participatory action? Or is your outcome, your desired outcome, to build a long-term or permanent health habit that's going to radically improve the landscape of your healthcare costs and also boost productivity? And of course, our contention is that the latter is more important and much more valuable for you from an ROI perspective. All the testing that we've done would show that incentives are, in fact, effective at changing short-term behavior. You want somebody to go to their doctor once a year, or you want them to take a health assessment, go get a flu shot, you can use incentives quite effectively to get them to do those one-time behaviors. However, what we find is that incentives are much, much less effective at improving a health habit. So it makes sense now for us to define what is truly a health habit. Health habit is only defined, in our view, as something that if you were to perform it every single day, you would become healthier as a result. It becomes a pattern of behavior. It becomes actually subconscious. The part of the brain that regulates habits is the most primordial part of the brain. It's closest to the spinal cord and the brain stem. And habits are not possible to be broken completely. They always will be there. So a good example of this is that once you learn how to ride a bicycle, even if you get brain damage later in life for some reason, and the majority of your brain is damaged, you will still have the ability, in most cases, to hop on a bike and ride it. There's a lot of data to support the idea that a habit is impossible to break completely. So what you have to do is replace that habit with some other sort of routine. And we'll show you how that habit loop works in a minute. And of course, being a wellness vendor, our whole mantra and mission is that we think people should be focused exclusively on improving daily health habits. We need them thinking and doing wellness every single day. And that is the end game. It's really to get people to build these subconscious patterns of behavior that become so deeply ingrained that it becomes part of their daily routine. And further to that goal, we believe, unlike many companies that stratify on the basis of risk and then give you specific interventions, that the prescription, if we're going to be a doctor here for a minute, or we're going to be a wellness, wellness physician, if there is such a thing, we're going to write a prescription for wellness, let's say, it would include these 4 elements. These are called vital behaviors, and if you perform each of these 4 things, you're bound to get healthier. It makes no difference your demographics. It makes no difference your health risks, your psychographics, your location. None of that matters. If you eat a whole foods, plant-based diet, no processed foods, in moderation, you get plenty of physical activity, adequate quality sleep, and you avoid all the bad stuff, you will get healthier no matter what your risk factors look like. So this is the fundamental here. These are the vital behaviors that we try to change. And every wellness company should try to change those 4 things. So then you have to look further and say, well, if those are the vital behaviors that are worth incenting, what we should really focus on with incentives is motivating direct action that's going to improve a person's health, not indirect things that don't directly improve their health, such as completing a survey or attending something like a health fair. So this simple litmus test here is, if you were going to take a health assessment every day of your life, would that action make you healthier? And the answer is, I hope we can all agree on this, of course not. However, if you get out every day and exercise for an hour, will you become healthier? Absolutely. Thinking again about what should you incent. We, again, being a wellness vendor, we are not biased on this. We simply are opportunists. What I mean by that is, when we started our company, we researched, where do you get the biggest bang for your wellness dollar? And the answer is extremely obvious. It's physical activity. And the reason is, there are many reasons, but the fundamental reason is that physical activity is what's called a keystone habit. And a keystone habit supports many, many other habits of wellness. So if you think of how an arch is constructed, a keystone is the last stone installed in an arch. When they hold the rest of it up with a lattice structure, they can put the keystone in last and remove the structure, the lattice that's holding the rest of the arch up. The keystone supports the entire structure of the arch. If you remove the keystone, the entire arch will crumble. And the keystone, therefore, is also something that helps habits cascade into one another. It's the nucleus. And physical activity is that nucleus. We have heard countless stories in our program and others from members that started with something so small as taking a walk once per day, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. That one simple act cascaded into other healthy behaviors. And the reason is that once you start doing something healthy, you become a healthier person in your mind. And once you decide that you're a healthier person in your mind, it becomes inconsistent for you to exhibit other unhealthy things. That's why you often hear that people, once they start a walking program, which sounds so benign, those are the people that ultimately can quit smoking, because one thing leads to another and it builds and grows. It becomes inconsistent for somebody to smoke if they're suddenly classifying themselves internally as somebody who's an exerciser. Physical activity is the most demonstrable, the most immediate, the most measurable way to improve a person's health and productivity. It can be validated wirelessly with technology that can be worn on the body. It can wirelessly upload a person's data. You can also test fitness through a fitness test called VO2 max, which tests your cardiovascular health. You can test strength, and you can test flexibility. All of those are empirical. It's unfortunate that we can't test nutrition. It would be great if we could somehow regulate and monitor what people are eating. The best way we've come up to do that is by working with grocery store retailers, and we have one client in particular that's tracking UPC codes of people as they check out. And we can track the percentage of food purchased in terms of fruit and vegetable consumption as opposed to things that are processed. So not quite there yet, but the technology is changing to where we could ultimately validate nutrition as well. Let's look at the habit loop for a minute and try to understand why incentives have such a hard time at influencing a long-term ingrained habit. A habit loop is comprised of 3 parts. I don't know if you've ever read a book called The Power of Habit, but I'd highly recommend it to anyone. And this is where the data comes from. The habit starts with a cue of some kind. A cue is usually temporal or emotional or situational, or depending on who you're with. So in other words, temporal meaning the time of day. So the cue in this example would be that the workday ends, you've had a stressful day. You react by going home, pouring yourself a couple martinis, and that's your routine. And your reward for drinking the martinis is that you unwind and relax and you feel a sense of satisfaction and relief. You can, reduce your stress. That creates a craving for the loop to continue the following day. So how do you change a habit? Well, we can't change the cues in our life. The workday is going to come to an end. Some days we'd wish it would come sooner than others. And the routine is what you can change. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is how do you get people to change the routine? And then how do you experiment with different rewards? And frankly, the least important thing in this cycle is changing the reward. The most important thing is getting people to change the routine. So here's an example. Workday in, just stressed out. Instead of drinking a couple of shots of tequila, you call up a friend and chat for 20 minutes, or you meet one of your neighbors and you walk the dog for 30 minutes. You can still get the same reward by doing that different routine. You might find that instead of craving the alcoholic buzz, you're craving socialization. You're craving somebody to listen to your problems. You may find all kinds of different things that you were actually craving that you can replace quite easily. And that's where the experimentation can really serve you best. Changing the reward isn't necessarily the best way to go. And as we'll find in our examples to come, it's the most expensive way to go. Another reason that incentives in general struggle to change habits is there's something called reversion. And basically the concept is that if you apply an incentive for somebody and they cease a behavior, let's say you cease smoking in order to achieve an incentive, but once the incentive is removed, you revert back to the original behavior, then the incentive was not effective at changing the habit. We see this a lot with tobacco. In fact, we've seen instances, believe it or not, where tobacco use rose once a company started using a tobacco cessation reward. That's because a lot of people start smoking before so that they can get the reward for quitting later, and then they find out that they end up becoming addicted to smoking. So it's kind of a backfired approach. But reversion is a very common situation when you get people to do something under the influence of a short-term incentive. Another thing that happens, and this is true, and many of you employers on the line will know this to be true, once you start using incentives, particularly financial, it becomes addictive like any drug. People do become addicted to the rewards. And people always ask us, do rewards motivate people? And the only thing that I can say unequivocally is that rewards do motivate people to do one thing, and that's to earn awards. So whatever you dangle in front of them, they'd like to get, but they'll develop a tolerance to it, just like any drug. You give them $100 the first year to take a health assessment. In order to get them to do that again the next year, you're likely going to have to raise the incentive because they've become tolerant to it. So essentially, once you start doing this, you need to budget for the fact that you're going to have to raise your budget year over year. And of course, once you do something just for the purpose of earning an incentive, you have less intrinsic motivation to do it properly. So if you bribe somebody, let's say, take an extreme example. If you paid somebody $1,000 to fill out a 200-question health assessment, there's a high likelihood that the people who would never do that assessment except for getting the incentive will fly through it, fudge the answers just to get the incentive, and you're left with data that's not only meaningless to you as an employer, but isn't going to change their behavior one bit. So what we'd like to suggest before we get into how you actually should implement incentives is let's focus on the things you can do before you resort to incentives, and use incentives only as a last-ditch effort or as a supplement to all the other things that you can do. The first thing that we'd like you to focus on is look at your environment. Look at around you in your building. Are your stairwells inviting, or are they drab and dreary? Could you illuminate them better? Could you hang pictures in the walls to get people to take the stairs instead of the elevator? Do people sit, or can you create standing desks at the workspace? Do you have areas where they can take a mental health break at work and do some light exercises? Do you have the right wellness program? Of course, we're incredibly biased there, so I'm not going to make this a sales presentation. But obviously, you need to have the right wellness program for your culture that's going to resonate with the majority of employees and get at least 60% of them engaged on a daily basis. Super champions, the unsung heroes of the wellness world. You have super champions roaming your halls, and you don't even know about them because they are going to be your true evangelists. We can teach you ways to find those people, engage those people, and they will recruit others into your wellness program without having to spend a dime. The other thing is the big trend right now is gamification, making the undesirable desirable. And that's basically taking something that's boring or a chore and making that into a game. So that's why you're seeing such a big burst of companies doing challenges, competitions, and harnessing healthy peer pressure, because the best way to change a habit is to publicly proclaim that you'd like to change it, and then gathering people that you trust and respect to support you in that goal. Once you publicize something, it becomes very inconsistent for you not to follow through, and you can have other people help you attain your goal. So doing all of those things is going to be your first resort. And by the way, at Sonic Boom, we do have standing desks for those that want them. The gentleman there on the left is our head of marketing, and the lady on the right is our co-founder and CEO, and we actually do walk the talk here. I'd like to also share one last little case study of why incentives should be your last resort, not your first. This email literally came to us yesterday, and we made it into a slide today because we thought it was so powerful. This gentleman works for a health plan. He sent us his before and after photo, and he gave us his story. The story was about 3 pages long, and he was so proud of it that we just were gushing. We were blown away by this guy, and so proud of him. And if you read through some of his quotes, you'll find that the keystone habits really kick in here. He started very, very modestly, lost a few pounds, joined the program, kind of didn't want to join it, but everyone else wanted him to be a part of it, and then he got more interested in competition. The incentives did not have anything to do with it. He mentioned nothing about incentives in his goal. He lost, about 100 pounds. So this is a remarkable journey for this gentleman. We're very proud of him for doing that. Okay, so now let's get into the real heart of the discussion. We've gone over kind of why we think you should focus on other things than incentives before you actually move down this path. So let's talk about what you can do if you're going to implement incentives. First thing is you have to categorize your incentive. There are 3 main types of categories. You've heard of all of these probably: carrot, stick, and what we call an orange stick. It's really just a stick in disguise. It comes to how you frame the discussion. We'll go through all of these with you, and we'll show you examples of each and how you might deploy them. First thing we'd like to say is that bribes don't necessarily work. We'd like to see that any carrot that's issued out there focuses on things like achievement and trophy value. Make sure that it has some kind of a sense of accomplishment for people rather than just giving them cash. I'll show you a slide in a minute of why we don't like the use of cash at all. The other things that can be used as carrots are the game mechanics of your wellness program or your own homegrown initiatives. This is the idea of people earning points, levels, badges, letting them achieve higher thresholds the more they do. Public recognition goes a real long way. We had a client get 60% engagement. It was a school district in Colorado. And every month they had a recognition ceremony in the gymnasium where they invited all the schools to come together. Came up with about 20 awards for people and didn't have to spend any money on financial incentives, but they had a tremendous outcry of support by the teachers who really enjoyed those public ceremonies of recognition. And then, of course, you can do things like ribbons and plaques, tchotchkes, low-cost items that have a lot of meaning attached to them but don't cost a lot of money. And then, of course, there's this idea of peer-to-peer reciprocity. In our program, we have a thing called Gotcha Being Healthy, where employees are empowered to reward one another for doing healthy things at work. So you can push this down to the employee level and let them be in control of holding each other accountable for health and acknowledging them for that. And if you're sitting down at the table with your consultant and you're trying to figure out how to structure your rewards, you have a lot of decisions to make. You can go a lot of different ways. I mean, you could throw cash at people. You could try gift cards. You can do raffles. You've got a lot of choices. This grid shows you, in our view, where the best ROI would come. And the best ROI comes in the upper left quadrant with the highest amount of trophy value, the lowest amount of cost. So social incentives, that would include the public recognition, peer-to-peer reciprocity, teamwork, camaraderie, competition, challenges, those kinds of things, levels, badges. And then tangible non-cash rewards in that category. Those are things like, water bottles, backpacks, gym bags, little tchotchkes that go back to the workplace, help promote your program, but they cost very little. Those are the most successful types of rewards. They have the best ROI. The other one, upper right quadrant, is also successful, higher cost, but also high trophy value. People love travel awards. And the reason travel and experiential rewards, experiential would be like if you want to reward somebody, give them a hot air balloon ride for 2, That's the kind of thing where people go do the activity and they're going to tell 50 people when they come back to work how cool that hot air balloon ride was. And that's worth $1 million when you get people running around talking about their experiences and how they won that reward. HSA, HRA contributions, very in vogue right now with consumer-directed healthcare, and we're pretty big advocates of that. We like to see accountability in the incentives, and we have a structure that can allow you to reward on the basis of HSA or HRA contributions. And then raffles, low cost but low trophy value. So, you're only awarding 1 or 2 people in a raffle, so it's not getting as much exposure. But raffles can be a very low-cost way to build some excitement. And then, of course, the biggest enemy to a wellness program is the idea of using cash. And I'll show you why. This grid shows basically how we would rank the different types of rewards, cash being the lowest stars out of 1 out of 5. And I have a slide coming up here that will show you more on cash. But essentially, gift cards are almost equivalent to cash, especially if they have a cash value. So I would say that they're very much in the same bucket. And we're equally antagonistic to both cash and gift cards. The gift cards can be branded for your wellness program, so that's one advantage to them. But other than that, they're almost the same. Tangible non-cash would be pretty solid. We do that a lot in our program. And then the social, of course, is the best because it costs you nothing. Experiential is good, and then HSA, HRA contributions would be also tied for 2nd place or 3rd place. So how do you take your carrots and make them even better? How do you turbocharge the carrots? One of the most forgotten things is to offer rewards immediately and unexpectedly. It's a differentiator between offering an if you do this, then I'll give you that, from a, oh, now I've noticed you doing this suddenly, let me acknowledge you right now on the spot. So think of a spot award. What's more meaningful? If you tell somebody, if you lose 10 pounds, I'll give you a $50 gift card. Or somebody walks up to you and says, oh my gosh, Sally, you look amazing. Have you lost some weight? That in our book is far more meaningful than an if-then reward. And then, of course, if you can make your reward ceremonies public, you're going to have much more excitement around your rewards. Okay, so cash. Why do we not like cash? First of all, it's fungible. What does fungible mean? Fungible just means that it's indiscernible. It's equivalent to other things that are the same as it. So in other words, if I give you $100 in 20s, you put that in your wallet, it becomes indistinguishable from the other 20s in your wallet. You forget, they become commingled. There's no sense of endowment. Endowment is when you have something, let's say you get an iPhone, your neighbor has an iPhone. There's a psychological effect called the endowment effect where people will tend to value their own stuff more than other stuff of equivalency. So if you will value your iPhone more than your neighbor's iPhone, even if they're identical. You can't get that effect with cash because there is a pure equivalency and it's completely fungible. There's no trophy value with cash. So once it's in your wallet, you forget about it. You can spend it on donuts, alcohol, cigarettes, and once you spend it, you forget why you ever had it in the first place. It's gone forever. It becomes taxable as ordinary income. It has the highest amount of dose tolerance because it is the least appreciated form of incentive, although it's the most requested form of incentive by employees. But they become tolerant of it, and they think of it as ordinary income. It develops an entitlement mentality. And let's face it, cash is the least imaginative form of incentive out there. When all else fails, you can't come up with a great idea, you use cash. Now let's go over some sticks. whether or not those are effective. Sticks are related to things like surcharges, penalties. There are some draconian companies that have been written up a lot in the media. You know, you have to do ABC or you're going to be fired, or you know, do the following or you're not going to get health care benefits. We've seen a lot of those different types of draconian types of models. They can disgruntle people, you know, at the worst. Can make people feel like they're being coerced or manipulated. So we'd like to recommend that you don't use the stick unless all else fails. But the stick will induce people to do things, and what we're seeing more effective is just an orange stick. An orange stick is simply the way you frame a stick. So when you go to the gas pump, you probably see this every day, they offer you the ability to save money by using cash instead of a credit card. Now they position it as you're going to be saving money for using cash. They don't say you're going to be penalized by using a credit card. So that's the idea with the orange stick. It's the way that you frame the discount. So if you're going to say to people, you would never say to somebody, we're going to do a $50 surcharge if you're a smoker. Well, that's about as hardcore stick as you can get. But what you can say is, hey, premiums have gone up for everybody. If you're a non-smoker, you're going to have a $50 discount. Same exact thing, just the way that you frame it in a positive light. Premium differentials are the ultimate orange stick. Seeing these become extraordinarily popular. We can administer this, and we do this very regularly, where you're going to be, you know, reducing premiums for the people that do the desired actions. And I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. The thing that's interesting about orange sticks, and the reason that they're so effective as opposed to carrots, is there's something called loss aversion. Loss aversion is another psychological concept that's been very, very well researched. It's the idea that people will generally do more to avoid a loss than to seek a gain. Said another way, people will do more to avoid pain than to seek pleasure. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to show that they'll do twice as much to avoid pain as to seek pleasure. So we find that a loss aversion in the form of a premium reduction creates the idea that, hey, I'm currently paying, let's say, $100 a month for my health care, but if I don't do the following, I'm going to be paying $150. That's a loss to me, and it affects every employee that doesn't play the game. That's why it's so effective. An endowment effect, too. Again, once you have something, you don't want to lose it. So that's another powerful attribute of the orange stick, especially tied to premium differentials. And then, of course, you know, if you want to fund your wellness program, you can do it through premium differentials, because you know that a certain percentage of people are not going to meet the desired outcome, or they're just going to refuse to play the game and they'll sit on the sidelines. Those people will be paying more, and those will subsidize the people who do play the game. So you can play this game where you can create kind of a quasi return on investment by employees funding the program. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how to calculate return on investment of your incentives. This is a really good formula, one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. I think one of her coworkers is on the line today. He gave us this really tricked out little simple formula, and we use it all the time to see if what we're doing makes sense. And most often we find that what employers are doing creates a negative return on investment, and that's simply because rewards are too low to exert the required behaviors that you need, or the rewards are too high and you spend too much money getting people to do things that don't actually create the savings that you thought they would. So the formula is the reward must be less than savings that you generate from the action times the probability that the behavior actually results in the savings. So that sounds all fancy schmancy. Let's look at a couple of easy examples. First example is on tobacco cessation. You know, almost every company has some form of tobacco cessation program. How much can you reward somebody for completing a tobacco cessation program? It's a great question. We get that one all the time. Gosh, how much should we reward for this? How do you figure it out? Well, let's just plug in a couple numbers. First, you have to know what the savings is if a person were going to quit tobacco. I've picked a very low number. There are so many studies that say that you'll save upwards of $9,000 or $10,000 per year if you get somebody who's a multi-pack-a-day smoker to go completely tobacco-free for the rest of their life. But we'll pick the lowest number that I think you could all agree would work, $1,000. What's the probability that tobacco cessation program will get somebody to quit? I put in 10%. That might be a little generous. We know that it takes about 7 attempts before somebody quits tobacco. Tobacco cessation programs have a very hard time getting results, but we'll say 10% for this argument. That means that if you do the math, you multiply the savings times the probability, $1,000 times 10%, you could reward $100 for anyone who completes the tobacco cessation program and still get a break-even return on investment. But you could not award $1 more than that, $100. Next example. I'll need some help here because you probably have sensed our views on health assessments because we don't think they directly affect people's health. So the question then is, does somebody that takes a health assessment save you money in the long run because it galvanizes some form of behavior change, or it gives them an aha moment, or catalyzes them to do some other form of health habit? So I have no idea what the actual savings is of a health assessment. I don't think anybody knows that, but let's just plug in a fun number just for fun here, $100, and the probability that that will actually work, say 20%. So we do the math, and that means you could reward somebody $20 and not a dime more for taking the health assessment. You can do your own fun numbers here if you think that it's worth more or less. A lot of clients that we talk to these days are no longer offering health assessments, and then a lot of clients we work with are just diehard fanatics of health assessments. So we stay out of that argument. We're happy to do whatever our clients want, and we have our own views, but we'll keep those to ourselves for the purpose of this discussion. The last example I think is the most telling, which relates to physical activity. So the first question is, let's say you reward somebody for doing 7,500 steps or 2 hours of activity about 1 out of every 2 days per year, which is a substantial amount of physical activity. Since most Americans walk less than 1 mile per day, 40% of Americans are sedentary. So if you can get people to do 2 hours of physical moving around, or 7,500 steps, those are about equivalent, by the way, if you use a wireless accelerometer to track that, you're going to be pretty darn well off. There's a lot of evidence to support physical activity being the biggest cost reducer and productivity enhancer, as we've already gone over previously. We picked a very conservative number of $2,400 if somebody would do this habit. And the probability that that habit would result in the savings, I put in an extraordinarily conservative number of 35%. It's probably much more like 70 or 80%. However, this will show you why physical activity is such a gold mine for you. If you multiply $2,400 times 35%, you'll notice that you could reward somebody who did that $840. Sounds like a lot of money. It's probably much higher than that, actually. And juxtapose that against your health assessment example, and you'll find real quickly where you should be putting your money is on rewarding the validation of the long-term physical activity goal, not completing a one-time activity. So I hope that one resonated for you. We're happy to share a copy of this presentation if you want to play with that formula. Now, as far as regulations are concerned, they're becoming much more lenient. You can reward up to 20% of the total cost of premiums. For premium contribution differentials, this is related to healthcare outcomes, not just participation. In fact, participation is exempt from these rules. You can do anything you want related to participation, 50%, 60, 70, 80% if you want to reward people or punish them for not doing a health assessment, for example. You can reward that. The rules apply to the results-based incentives tied to health status. Those get even more lenient in January of this year, and for tobacco, they're the most lenient of all. You can reward up to 50% or punish up to 50% for tobacco users. And of course, the reward has to be available to everybody. You have to create reasonable alternative standards in place for people that may not be able to complete the standard. I'll show you how to get around those or to minimize those, because there are some very easy ways to reduce those to a bare minimum. An infinitesimally small number of people will apply for an appeal if you structure your incentives the right way. The HIPAA rules, I should have inverted these two slides, but HIPAA does allow benefit plan differentials as well as premium contribution differentials. So you can offer better health plans, better meaning lower deductibles, more favorable coinsurance. And then the Affordable Care Act expanded and built upon the HIPAA wellness rules. So what we'd like to see if you're going to develop incentives around things that matter, here's how you think about it in terms of a pie chart. We'd like to see that you reward participation far less than the other two things. Outcomes or improvement would be kind of a bigger chunk of the pie. But the biggest chunk of the pie should be in validated behaviors that directly lead to health improvement. That's the only way you're going to make a dent in healthcare costs and productivity. So we like to see the pie also have an award cap set on it. In other words, give people the opportunity to earn the maximum award even if they don't hit the outcomes goal. Let them show you through concerted effort and engagement that they're doing everything in their power to hit it, and let them still earn the maximum, even if they don't hit your health status goals. So I'll show you an example of how you would put that into play using our system. There are several on the market. We have one that is called the Wellness Incentive Management System, and the main objective of this is to really try to bend the healthcare trends and put in some real meaningful incentives that tie in other vendors. Because none of our clients just use Sonic Boom. We're dealing with clients that have 5 or 6 other vendors, including companies like Castlight and WebMD and different coaching companies and health assessment vendors, biometric screening vendors. They're looking for a way to aggregate that information. They're also looking for a way to reward people for achieving not only the participation in those different opportunities, but also the results based on their health status, their biometric screening. So here's a simple example. You could structure this any way you want, but this is a simple example of how you could do an outcomes-based system that still gives you the opportunity to earn the maximum reward through effort and engagement. So the first thing is the reward value is going to be $900. We're going to do contribution differential. So that's our orange stick model. You could also do HSA contributions if you prefer. Or you could do trophy value prizes, which would be great as well. Notice that if you complete this fitness test, which is your evaluation, we like to see companies do a VO2 max. Not many of them do it, but it is the best way to quantify somebody's cardiovascular fitness, along with the biometric screening, either a standard finger stick or a venipuncture. You earn $100. Then after that, let's just say you don't qualify for any of the other incentives, the glucose, blood pressure. Let's say you smoke, so you don't qualify for that. And let's say you don't have good fitness and you don't improve your fitness. You can still qualify for the max if you do the physical activity goal, 7,500 steps or 120 minutes, 180 days out of the year. So 800 plus 100 right here gets you the max of 900. Sorry for the messiness. So here's what the wellness incentive system looks like. It's very flexible in that you can plug in all the different attributes that you want, all the different vendors that you want. It brings them all into one place. So I can show you that, basically you can plug in a biometric vendor like this, and as soon as you did the biometrics, we can validate that by getting a data file from them. You would get a checkbox for that one. We can reward for completion of a health assessment with any different vendor. We've worked with WebMD and about a dozen others. So once you do the assessment, we get a file from WebMD, and check, done. Then you go do the fitness test on such and such a date, again, validated by the vendor, and then check. And then you get to do all the bonus stuff down here, which is doing your engagement and effort type events. So what I'd like to do now is just jump over to a real-life example that we built for this presentation that you see system in action. So that slide I showed you earlier shows that exact screen I showed where it's the outcomes-based incentives tied to also physical activity. So the top item here is the fitness test and the biometrics. If you earn that, you've qualified for the gateway, which is the prerequisite. Then if you go on down here, you got the physical activity goal. And if you do that physical activity goal, I've completed 4 days toward that goal. I'm going to get $800, and I've met the entire incentive requirement. I get $900 toward my premium reduction. But if I don't do the physical activity, I can still qualify for the max by having excellent health status. So good fitness, good BMI. I'm a non-smoker. I've got great glucose, or I've improved it by 5%. Good blood pressure, or I've improved it by 5%. So I hope that helps you see how things are flexible and how you can structure an incentive system based on all these different ideas that we've thrown at you today. I will throw up a summary slide. I will not read it to you, but I would love to answer questions that you have and stay on the line for a little bit. And again, this is recorded, and we can send you a link to it if you'd like. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something, and we really appreciate your attendance today. I would love to hear feedback and answer your questions. And I'll just read them off as they come in. First question: how does timing of providing premium credits play into the engagement? We pay out the reward, small discount each month rather than in a lump sum, but we don't see great participation. Oh, and they earn in the prior year, so a discount for next year's premium costs. We've seen that a lot, where companies are doing premium discounts, and they don't have the inspirational program to back it up. They don't have the events that are naturally, organically driving interesting things within the company. It's a classic case of rewarding the wrong thing in most cases. And as I showed you from the ROI example, it's spending too much money on the wrong things to get you a negative ROI. So again, I'd go back to, we've had a lot of clients that do 0 financial incentives and they still get dynamite engagement. And you simply use your incentives to amplify engagement and to help steer people into the most meaningful things. And we'd love to talk to you further and show you some more examples and consult with you and see exactly what you're up to. And a lot of you are asking for copies of the slides. We appreciate that. And we will, if you email me, my name's Brian Van Noy. I will write my email address up here. And you can, whoops. Feel free to email me, and we'll send you a link. Oops. So I'm at brian@sbwell.com. Okay, and then a couple more questions, and then I'll just sign off, and feel free to send me emails with specifics. What specific services does Sonic Boom provide? We'd love to give you a tour, capabilities demonstration. We do everything from incentive management to gamification. We were the pioneer of gamification back in 2007. Got a lot of validated things with physical activity. And we've got 10 program modules. Incentive management is one of those 10, so we'd love to give you a tour of what we're capable of doing. The next question is, how do you incentivize those who do not carry medical insurance so they have no premiums? Yeah, that's even better, because frankly, then we can do the tangible non-cash awards. We can still do public recognition. We can do all the social incentives. We can do something we call boomer bucks, where people are achieving through a progressive model. The more they do, the more boomer bucks they earn. They can go shopping from our catalog of several thousand items, which is tangible non-cash awards, much better than cash or gift cards. And then you can do the peer pressure, the competition, the camaraderie. Makes no difference if people are on medical or not. None of our clients limit the program to those just on the medical program. because then you have the haves and the have-nots, and they feel completely alienated. So we love it when clients offer it to everybody, and most of our clients are starting to offer it to spouses as well, because that creates even more accountability and participation. And I don't see a whole lot of questions, and I'd love to just be sensitive to your time. So we'll go ahead and stop recording now. And again, greatly appreciate your attention. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Feel free to email us. We'd love to hear from you. And stay healthy. Thanks.